Today's special episode is sponsored by Riipen, the #1 project-based learning platform for institutions, learners, and employers. And it's hosted by my friend and colleague, Dr. Nicole Crevar, who lives at the intersection of career-connected learning and university teaching. Nicole is joined by Jason Blackstock, founder and CEO of How to Change the World, Jeffrey Moss, founder and CEO of Parker Dewey, and Dana Stephenson, co-founder of Riipen. I hope you enjoy this lively and very timely episode.
Welcome, Dana, Jeff, and Jason. I'm really excited to be the guest host today for this extended series on experiential learning, and glad we could find some time in our busy schedules to really dig deeper into this topic. So, on that note, I want to get us started with a big picture question about the future of higher education. So, I've been teaching and working in higher ed for the better part of the past decade, and I've really seen two major challenges, at least to traditional higher ed. The first is, of course, AI, right? It's challenging the way we teach, we assess students, the way we're engaging with students. And the second big challenge is really this pressure and increasing support, I would say, from like the government, higher levels, right? Towards apprenticeship pathways, towards post secondary pathways that are more aligned with direct industry training. And in many ways, that's kind of challenging the traditional higher ed. So, my big question is, where do you see the future of higher education and learning going? How does it need to adapt to meet these challenges? Or are there other challenges than the two I mentioned that you think are more pressing right now?
I think you've hit two of the most important current trends with how AI is transforming things and the government push towards more experiential based, authentic experiential work based learning. But I think it's important to put those in the context of the history that's led us here. AI is now at the forefront of transforming the experience for students, but content has been commoditized over the last half century, at least quarter century for sure. And so it's increasingly become easier and easier for people to get high quality content. Take MIT OpenCourseWare as a great example. Some of the best engineering and science courses available free online to anybody. And it's only getting easier with AI to now make it personalized in terms of taking that content and personalizing it. So the writing's been on the wall since at least early 2000s that higher ed's monopoly on we have the content and you have to come here to get it. Well, actually, no. Like now, you can get the best lecturer in the world summarized in 5 minutes by ChatGPT. And then flip to the other side, the implications of that. Yes, governments are shifting where money is going, but why? When you have headlines in the BBC, New York Times, The Economist, these are not Fox News talking about the question of, is a degree worth it anymore? The economics don't add up. Like, why would you walk away with 100 or 200 grand in debt when it's not going to give you the earnings and the potential? So there's some underlying issues that have set up the challenges. And so where is all of this going? Well, unsurprisingly, we're on a podcast about experiential learning, so it'd be surprising if the answer was anything else. But I genuinely believe that the future of learning is experiential, social, and AI supported. And AI supported in the sense that that's where individual content and learning is going to happen. But the experiential and social is no longer, oh, this is nice to have on the edge of your degree. This is moving into the core of the degree program, and it has to. So that's the future of higher education on this.
I agree with everything Jason just said. So I won't focus on the future of higher education as much being social and experiential, because I think Jason did an amazing job of that and always does. I think there's, when we think about higher education today, and the higher education to workforce transition, we often think about three distinct challenges. They're all related. They're related to the challenges that you described. The challenges you described are leading to these, but those are relevancy, signaling, and trust. And so relevancy, when we first started this company over 15 years ago, or nearly 15 years ago, we were saying it back then, how is higher education going to keep up with industry at the pace of change that industry is moving at? We noticed it back then. I think we can all tell the pace of how everything is changing today. Things are moving faster and faster than ever. The traditional way that higher education institutions look at keeping curriculum relevant, industry advisory boards, going through all the approvals and faculty senate to get a curriculum approved might take 2-3 years. By the time that's actually approved, it's often felt like it's just totally disconnected from what's actually happening in the real world. That's only happening again faster and faster. Now, this doesn't mean that higher education shouldn't continue to focus on the durable skills and preparing learners to learn and unlearn and relearn and be adaptable, be resilient, and be prepared for a career of lifelong learning as they continue to transition from career to career, as the skills that are needed for new occupations or how occupations evolve continue to change. Those are the durable skills that are very important. I'm sure that we'll get into, but keeping curriculum relevant to what's actually happening in industry and making sure there's very tight feedback loops that help instructors and educators and administrators adapt their curriculum and their programming to better meet the needs of industry and set their students up for success when they graduate. That is a really important problem when it comes to relevancy. Signaling, I think, I'll just mention that one quickly. When I, you know, when I was going into higher education, my dad didn't finish high school. My mom didn't go to college. They both said to me, "Just go and get a degree. I don't care what you want, what you do. Just get a degree. Degree will help you land a job. You'll figure it out." Um, I'm not sure. I mean, sure, many people have that story from their parents. I'm not sure if that worked back then, but I'm certain now, based on the data that we're seeing, that that doesn't work today. Too many students are graduating underemployed, nearly 50%. And what's worse about that is that we know now that if you start your career underemployed, you're more likely to stay underemployed 5 or 10 years later. So we know that first job post graduation actually matters. And the employers who face a ton of uncertainty, especially smaller businesses who can't afford a bad hire, used to really be able to leverage, or at least the perception was they would leverage the credential as a proxy for being a good fit. As things continue to change more rapidly in the workforce, and that risk and uncertainty of investing in early career talent or training early career talent increases, that proxy just isn't working anymore. So we need better signaling, better evidence that signals to employers that students have the skills and the experience to land meaningful work and make a meaningful contribution in the workforce post graduation. And the final one really here is trust. Back to Jason's point, we've all seen the headlines. We've heard repeatedly that we've seen that investments from government continue to decline. There's just no real political penalty for underinvesting or divesting from reducing investments in higher education. And that's because the public has lost, when we're hearing it, it's lost a lot of trust and confidence in the purpose of higher education. And so I think, just to really bring this back to Jason's point around experiential learning, the future is experiential, is that if we want the public to see higher education more positively, then we need higher education to engage the public in more positive ways. And one of the best ways to do that is through experiential learning, getting students out into their communities, working with small businesses, making a real difference out there in the world and demonstrating that they've got the skills, they've got the experience to help take on some of the biggest wicked problems that our world is facing. And so I just wanted to share that quote. Heard it recently from Brian Rosenberg, and just thought it was absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's so many kind of moving parts, right, that are happening within this context that I think you really hit on an important point of like public perception of higher ed right now, because it has not been, it's been declining, right? Which is why we're seeing all this like funding and support for alternative pathways, and it's challenging. What about your thoughts, Jeff, on this, on like AI, the future of higher ed?
First of all, I'm obviously a believer in experiential learning. There's a reason we named our organization after Francis Parker and John Dewey. We believe it's a core part of all of education, ranging from K-12 to post-secondary and beyond. Second, when I think about what's going on in general, I mean, we're seeing the pendulum continue to swing too far one direction than the other. It started, again, 20 years ago with this concept that everyone needs a college degree. The appropriate sort of counter reaction is, does anyone need a degree, and are we vocationalizing what is post-secondary education, replacing degrees with credentials or micro credentials or otherwise? In reality, the right solution is somewhere in between. The other thing that's been interesting to watch is this constant sort of chase to keep up with the perceived future demands of employers. We see that with apprenticeship programs. We see that in higher ed. We see it with training titles like prompt engineering. At the end of the day, the real value of post-secondary education is not preparing someone for their first job out of school, but it's preparing them for their entire career. So what's been happening is I think there's so much focus on, again, preparing someone for that first job. How do we teach someone how to be a coder to get them through post-secondary education as quickly as possible and into that job? Or how do we teach them to be IT support or insurance underwriting or, again, prompt engineer, but we're ignoring the fact that those core skills, the problem solving, communication, adaptability, et cetera, are really the skills that post-secondary education is well designed to train for, and are those skills that are vital both for that first job and for the longer term career. So I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict what the job of the future is going to be. But if forced to sort of have some direction, I think the impact of AI is going to be much the same as the impact of the internet 20 years ago. It's not going to be a whole new set of jobs revolving around AI per se, but rather how can we leverage these new technologies to do existing jobs more efficiently and effectively?
I'll just build off of that point, Jeffrey, because I think there's one trend we haven't talked about, which is what's happening for employers right now. AI is radically reshaping how they are trying to understand and grapple with the world. Never mind the geopolitics that are going on, the economic ruptures, the social issues. So employers are under increasing strain. And exactly to your point, Jeffrey, the points that they are most the things that they are most needing in employees at any stage: problem solving, resilience, adaptability, communication skills. And if we're prepared, and how do you learn those? You don't learn it from a lecture.
Completely agree. But you also, again, this is where I think there's too much attack on post-secondary education. Why are we having students graduate with philosophy or history or um, sort of ancient language majors? Yes, some subset of them are going to go into academia, but I think about my starting class when I was an investment banker. Yeah, I was a finance accounting major sitting next to someone who was a philosophy major, and on the other side, someone who was an English or art history major. In reality, they learned those core skills, and after 2 weeks or 3 weeks of being trained in New York, they had the exact same finance skills I did, or 98% of those finance skills that I did, because again, they learned those core skills: how to learn, how to problem solve,
Yep.
what are the right questions to be asking, whether you're asking an AI prompt or whether you're asking an Excel spreadsheet.
The point that I would probably add to this is that the what higher education uh, really is well set up to do, but really needs to focus on, is teaching learners how to learn, teaching learners how to handle ambiguity, teaching learners how to engage in teams and collaborate and work with teams where individuals might come with different perspectives, um, handling challenging, messy problems where there's no real right or wrong answer, but really need to dig in, listen, come up with really understand the problem, present that problem, get feedback, iterate from that feedback, prove that they can listen to that feedback, present it again. Again, working in a team, collaborating. And the traditional higher education system has really been structured around individual success for so much of it. As an individual, I'm trying to memorize my textbook, the lecture notes, and then regurgitate that into a test, write a paper, and individually get a great grade. But so much of the workforce, when we actually get out there, we know that we're going to be working with teams. We're going to be working with some amazing people. We're going to be working with people that maybe aren't necessarily. We kind of wonder sometimes, how do they even get this job? But that's just the reality of what real workplace is like. And we have to figure out how to make the best of that, and how to support others around us, and lift everyone else up, and deliver the best possible outcomes that we can, in the work that we do on an ongoing basis. And so I think higher education is really well poised for that, but there needs to be some major changes in how content is delivered, as Jason was saying earlier, and how students are more engaged in actually taking their learning and applying it in a real world setting on a regular basis and building up that evidence that they can demonstrate to future employees.
I would push back a little bit because I think schools do a really good job of training that, whether it's the individual skills or the team based. I think the problem is, and it goes back to something you said before, the lack of signal or appreciation. And to Nicole's question, it's the employer side. Employers have built processes that say certain skills are important, like problem solving, teamwork, adaptability, or ability to learn. And in reality, the recruiting process or hiring process does a pretty poor job of assessing those skills. They're more focused on can you code in Python or do a DCF in Excel than understanding if someone is adaptable. For the most part, again, always exceptions, but we see it actually getting worse. I mean, with the application avalanche, you talk about AI, there's the business side of AI, but there's also the recruiting process side of AI. Companies are inundated with resumes. We've seen a 200 to 300% increase over the past couple of years of number of job applications. So employers are often, again, using the wrong signal who they should put into their process, and in their process, not always assessing for those skills that are most valued for success.
Completely agree with you. I think that's the biggest challenge is that in the absence of strong signals, that I think the employer ecosystem is telling us that the credential no longer demonstrates or signals teamwork, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, problem solving, and everything else that we've previously been hiring for. We're using proxies, we're using skill assessments, and so in the absence of these really strong signals, there, I would describe the applicant tracking system problem all over again. Huge, massive problem, an enormous amount of inequities. So we've got to figure out together, and I think that's where intermediaries like us, companies like us, working with higher education institutions can really make a huge difference. Is how do we create those signals that support learners and higher education students, telling the story that these students have the durable skills that are so valuable, that are so important to employers, so they hire based on those instead of falling back to these other applicant tracking systems and focus on specific technical skills.
I think there's one piece that I'm certainly seeing in the trends with the employers that have the most selective processes or the best processes. They're not relying on signals anymore. They want to see the individuals do the work. They run their own, whether it's hiring competitions or they engage directly with universities in project-based learning, and they see the students working. They see the experiential learning happening, and then you're not relying on a proxy signal. You're watching the individuals, and you're getting your own staff engaged with those individuals, going, yes, Dana. Yes, Jeffrey. No, we don't want Jason. No, forget it. Like, doesn't have the skills.
Jason, 100% agree. I mean, I think about when I was interviewing coming out of business school with, again, McKinsey, Bain, BCGs of the world, the last stage in the interview process was the 5-hour, 3-hour case. And it was great. The trick is, how do we front load it into a process in an efficient, scalable way? And then taking it even back a step, how do we make that assessment, if you will, a way to actually learn? How do we bring it into the classroom or classes that don't sound like job titles, still give them the opportunity to participate in that experience, to demonstrate their skills, and help them better appreciate and understand and build skills like communication and problem solving?
And I think, Jeffrey, this is exactly my point. I think as content has become more commodified and everyone can have their own AI agent coaching them through the content, it opens up a lot more space in the curriculum for better project-based, authentic, experiential learning that's engaging with communities, engaging with employers, and opening up a lot more surface area for students to be having that experience and surfacing that to potential employers. And I think it's a win-win if you do the scaffolding right around the educational components. If you designed it for learning, experiential learning, not just an experience for the sake of it.
100% agree. The one thing I will build on with that is it's great when you have faculty members or schools that want to bring experiential learning into the classroom. But we also need to recognize that we operate in reality where a lot of those institutions fall back on the academy or fall back on, again, faculty members that I'm not talking about vocationalizing post secondary, but don't see how experiential learning brings in. So it's great when you can bring it into the classroom. But one of the things we've tried to do since day one is make sure it's accessible to students outside of the classroom. When a student is doing a micro internship on our platform, they're going to a faculty member's office hours. They're reaching out to a mentor or an alum to get insights.
Yeah.
They're taking ownership of that experiential learning pathway, building upon what they've learned in and out of the classroom. And it's great when the faculty member's involved, but it also needs to work when the faculty member's not.
Jeffrey, I agree. And so I agree that is a great way to set it up. Uh, it's the piece that I would add though, and this goes right back to the first question, like the beginning of this stream of the conversation. Higher ed is in crisis. More faculty I talk to across more universities, and this isn't just deans, presidents, provosts, this is faculty members, they want to transition towards experiential learning. But I'll use a quote we use in our programs. You cannot create what you cannot imagine. And the vast majority of those faculty members have never been exposed to experiential learning at any scale or had a chance, never mind been trained in how to do it pedagogically, know how to build the scaffolding, have the support, and have the technology in order to do it. And so I think that's yes, we need to be giving students who are in the system right now, because it's not going to change overnight, as many opportunities as we can. But going back to Dana's point, a lot of students are first generation higher ed. They're just struggling to navigate through the system. Finding extracurricular is hard for them. And higher ed is transitioning rapidly towards wanting to do this, but they just don't know how at scale. So we have to help them. And I think that's a big piece. And 10 years from now, I don't think higher ed is going to look much like it does today, largely because those that are trying to, except for the Ivies, are probably not going to be in business.
Yeah. So let me transition that into kind of my next question, thinking about key stakeholders with experiential learning, students and faculty, or of higher ed, right? Students and faculty. So for the students, one of my questions is engagement and exposure. Like, how early should students be having work-based learning, be working with employers, and maybe how are you helping them make the connection between these durable skills? Like when you were talking about all the humanities, my heart sings because I'm a humanities PhD and I'm like, yes, this is what I do all day, right? The communication, the teamwork, right? This adaptability, navigating ambiguity. How early should students be building those skills while working with employer projects? And like freshman year, right? Like how early is there a benefit to that? And then the other side of that is really with faculty. What I see the issue with faculty buy-in and what I've experienced in my own classrooms is a lack of time, resources, and training. And you kind of hit on these, Jason. So how are you helping with that? How are you intervening? When I think of time and we have our syllabi due at the beginning of the semester, right? So we kind of need to have an employer project figured out in at least to an extent at that point. But that doesn't always align with businesses, right? They have projects when they have projects. So curious your thoughts on, like the student and the faculty roles in these and how your companies are trying to support really those key stakeholders.
Happy to jump in here. So first off, first question, I think I'm sure everyone on this call would agree, early and often, as early as possible, as often as possible. Now, I think it's also really important to note there's a wide variety of different types of experiential learning. There's a whole continuum. We like to think of it as a continuum that starts at lower intensity, lower stake experiences, all the way up to higher intensity, higher stake experiences. So on the higher stake end, you've got your traditional internships, your co-ops, even your apprenticeship model. On the lower stakes, lower intensity, you've got simulations that can be done asynchronously on your own time. Student can bang off 60 in a week to get some real exposure. Very low cost and highly scalable. Um, and so the best models that we've seen is that when higher education or higher education working with different partners looks very intentionally at their programming and starts to examine what is the right intervention for the students at the right time, meeting them where they are, helping them build confidence, helping them build, gain career clarity, gain exposure, and then be able to scaffold that and have high dosage of experiences throughout their entire education pathway. This really helps solve this problem that we've all been, really sort of been talking about here, which is how to get a job without experience, how to get experience without a job. Internships were meant to solve that, but then the challenge became how do you get an internship without experience, how do you get experience without an internship? The problem just keeps going on. So early and often, if we can really get started as early as in high school, there's a real opportunity to start scaffolding up to better prepare students, ensure they have the right career clarity, and make the best decisions with their limited time as they invest in their education and training pathway. Um, I answered that first because I think we all know higher education for faculty members, huge major challenges in terms of time commitment, um, and there's incentive misalignment. Um, the Where do I have the resources? Where am I going to find the companies? Where am I going to how am I going to structure these to ensure that my students are set up for success? These are all challenges that we hear over and over and over again. Um, there are different models, and so really want to speak to the audience here, and that they should understand that there are a wide variety of models. And while we can meet students where they are, we can also meet faculty members where they are. There are some uh, experiential learning offerings that have much less chance of variance. A simulation is very structured. You know what you're going to get. The students know what they're going to get. They run through it. It may not be as high value, but it might be a good place to start for certain faculty members for them to get used to it before they move on to a higher stakes, higher impact, higher intensity type of engagement. And so I think it's important to think about meeting the students where they are, but also meeting faculty members where they are. And I mentioned variance earlier. The real challenge as institutions start to scale this up is that as you scale, variance can increase. And when variance increases, then quality may erode. So having a very structured process that ensures quality is really important. It creates really strong feedback loops back to the higher education institutions to better understand how to adapt their programs, adapt the kinds of employers that they're working with, and ensure that their students are set up for success. That's sort of the real bare minimum. Uh, I think the best examples that we see are when higher education institutions have a leader who is committed to this. They're centralizing the operations of this. They might have a hub and spoke model where they have different faculty members have their own individual who's supporting it. But what we have to avoid if we're going to be embedding this into curriculum is we have to avoid the faculty member feeling like an account manager for employers. If they have to track down employers, if they have to track down engagement, there to be sort of customer support for employers, that's just all this net new work on top of their existing workload that sort of makes the model sort of fall apart. So quality gates that ensure the right employers come in, super important. But then having support that can take on that level of engagement with the employer, whether that's internal support or whether that's an outsourced support or a combination of them of the two, that makes all the difference in our experience.
One of the college students described the process and was less creepy when she did versus a 50-something married guy as I want to go on dates before I get engaged with my summer internship or apprenticeship or capstone or married with my full-time role. This opportunity to go on job dates is really, really valuable for that first or second year to do very much top of funnel exploration. For that junior or senior, it might be more honing in. I want to do marketing, but do I like marketing analytics versus marketing content? Do I want to work in a big company or small company? Do I want to work in a certain industry? So completely agree, Dana, about the value of a plethora or breadth of different experiences that can align with the student's learning journey as they're going through. The part that I'll push back on is a little bit about the need to standardize and get faculty buy-in. One of the things that we found is that we're actually took a more Socratic approach to getting faculty buy-in, that we'll see faculty members that we would hear from deans and university presidents didn't want to change curricula, didn't want to bring experiential learning into the classroom. A student would literally show up in office hours to ask a question about a micro internship. And the next day in the class, the professor would be talking with the student and the class about it. The platform that we use in the approach, yeah, we have some templates, but employers can adjust. Each of these micro internships ranges from 10 to 30 hours of work by the student. And again, the only thing consistent is it's a defined deliverable. It's something that a student sort of can deliver to the employer at the end that's well understood. We have found that even with this variance, even without the guardrail saying you need to do a project like X and there's a faculty involved, 98.57% of students found the experience valuable. We also found from the employer side, 96% found students met or exceeded expectations. So we have found that if you let the market work, if you let the employer define a project that they need done, or have a student being given that well-defined project, doesn't matter quite what it is, but you can see even with a high level of variance, still getting valuable experiences.
We do 60,000 learner experiences per year, growing at about 25-30% per year at the moment. So um, fairly significant volume. I think what you we've done over 300,000 since we started, which we're very proud of. In the early days when we first started this, it really was because exactly like you said, corporatization of the classroom was a big fear. Vocationalization of the classroom was a big fear. So when we first came to an academic institution, the rule always was you're in the driver's seat. You, as the educator, you decide how you want to run this. We have templates, we have best practices, but really at the end of the day, you run it the way that you want to run it. And what we started noticing is that as institutions, that worked very well. It worked extremely well. We've got over 50,000 employers in our marketplace, 3,000 to 8,000 projects at any given time. You can start to get this, clearinghouse of matching the right project to the right educator at the right time. And that becomes easier and easier, and you achieve economies of scale, which can drive down the cost for academic institutions with our business model. As you scale, but I think as you start, as we noticed, as institutions started to scale beyond the early adopters, beyond the champions, to the started to cross the chasm to the early majority and the late majority, those who have never even done this before, who had never considered doing this before, um, you started to see quality start to erode. You started to see educators have different challenges in the ecosystem. And so what we found is that if we were a little bit more prescriptive, and to be honest, it was actually the market telling us for this. In the early days, it was, hey, we want to own this. As this became more of a as a focus for higher education institutions would come to us and say, how should we run this? What are the best practices? How do we set this up? What are you seeing from the data? What are you seeing that actually demonstrates that students and employers get the best possible experiences? And so we started offering more structure. We started offering more training. We started offering more guidelines of how you should actually run this, how you should actually track, how you should do reflection, how you should even what rubrics you should actually use, how employers should evaluate. Now, it doesn't mean that any individual educator can't come onto our platform and still run it the way they want to run it. But we're seeing over and over again the success from the learner and from the employer increases when you start to focus on certain best practices. That's just on an average, of course, overall. And so I do definitely see your point and definitely believe in both models. But I think as we really start to scale this, as we start to get into the millions of learners, the millions of employers participating in this on a regular basis, that kind of structure that really builds evidence and a feedback loop that academic institutions can really trust and rely on will be really important. And that standardization helps support that. Similarly, that standardization helps build evidence that will support employers really understanding it. And ultimately, if we're looking, going back to the beginning of this conversation, for government to continue investing more in these kinds of interventions and these kinds of experiences in higher education writ large, then that kind of standardization helps produce some of the evidence that really supports this movement being such a powerful one.
Building off of this, I would say there's a need for a dozen models, the ones that we have, and a dozen more, and a dozen more after that. Because the sheer volume, 265 million people a year in higher education right now, there's no one model that fits it all. Yes, we need, absolutely, Jeffrey, I agree. We need the examples that are student driven wherever possible because they're desperate. They need it. Frankly, graduates need it as well. It shouldn't just be limited to current students. Faculty need a lot of transition. I built the original How to Change the World program in University College London. Nice global top 10 university, still going, graduates, technically brilliant, practically useless. This is not a thing we need to find a way of bridging that. And so it's how do you build scalable programs? Dana, I agree. One model is building standardized programs that are around employer engagement. Just for context, the original program that we built, and one of the models we still very much run with How to Change the World, we don't start with employers. We start with communities. There are a whole bunch of challenges. Walk out your door of any university, social, economic, environmental challenges, inequalities, all sorts of issues that students are passionate about tackling. Service-based learning has a long history and tradition, and it's a beautiful form of EL, of experiential, of authentic experiential learning that is similarly engaging all the skills you need, engaging real stakeholders, talking to real people, understanding, only in the context of what we built with How to Change the World and built on the model that service learning has always taken. It's, well, what's the problem in the first place? When you have a small, Jeffrey, to your point, at one end of the spectrum, you can have a business that defines a problem in a clear way and provides it to the students. Walk out into any city surrounding a university and say, solve homelessness. Well, yeah, there's no one who's packaging that problem nicely for you. So critical thinking, problem solving, and what aspect of homelessness? How are you going to hone in? Oh, maybe it's air pollution over here. And so what the model that we take is to run mass experiential learning programs. At UCL, it was 1,500 students at a time. And since scaling, we've done tens of thousands. And it's how do you provide them a challenge in which they go, holy crap, I don't know the problem. Oh, wait, I'm working with 3 other people on my team who have different skills, different knowledge. Well, together we can hone down on what we're uniquely situated to do. And it's a different type of experiential learning. It's more the sort of entrepreneurial direction or social enterprise direction. And to go back to the first question you asked, Nicole, when I think about when should students start getting experiential learning? I would like grade 6, but since we're not talking about that right now, we'll take first year undergraduate. It has to start from there in terms of project-based learning. And I'll push a little bit on the definition of at least what I mean by experiential learning. Dana, I agree wholeheartedly. The spectrum of broad experiential learning includes simulations, case studies, etc. But I think we need to be talking about authentic experiential learning from first year. And that means a real world messy project. And some of the times, like let's take an example that we used when I was teaching at Harvard. Solve the sustainability issues for Harvard campus. That's a great project because, by the way, there's all sorts of issues that need to, and students love working on those projects, and they're creating real ideas that help move forward sustainably. And it doesn't matter what campus you're on, you've got real challenges on that campus. And so thinking about the different models that can be built in across the years to bring in, it's a learning journey. It's a learning journey in the experience you're having, whether it's a micro internship, a term length course, a thesis project, or across an entire degree program, thinking about that learning journey and scaffolding it. And I was on a panel 2 weeks ago. Dana was there, and Kemi Jonah.
Kemi talks about the fact that you want to flood the zone with opportunities for students, extracurricular and curricular, as much as you can put in front of them.
And he accused me of one-upping him because I'm like, yes, well, now we need to flood the court. As we're talking about the core of the curriculum being more and more replaced by AI, we need 10x, 100x more opportunities than the 3 of our organizations are providing. And we have to, and they have to take on all of these different flavors, with the core thing being, it's a clear, authentic experiential learning means, yes, you're learning from experience, but with clear learning objectives and a highly scaffolded process. And that's what makes it replicable at scale, even if you're taking very different approaches to the type of experience you're providing.
The one thing I agree with a lot of what you said. And again, I'm really happy you brought up the fact that it will be a mosaic of different experiences. One of the questions that at least I have is, we're sitting here in 2026 still talking about how come more universities don't have experiential learning we could have had this conversation a decade ago or 2 decades ago. This has been a hot topic for schools and education for literally decades. I mean, again, back to Francis Parker and John Dewey, we're talking about it. And one of my worries is that a lot of post-secondary institutions are trying to make the perfect or allowing the perfect to be the enemy of the good. They are thinking that to bring experiential learning into the classroom, we need to get faculty buy-in. We need to redo curricula. We need to standardize. And all I am suggesting is if we start with that as what we need to be, we're not going to see that traction. So I love the fact, again, there's different approaches, some of which will evolve into the in-classroom experience. And when you have faculty members engaged, let's lean into it. But if we're going to try to force it and standardize, I think that has been the biggest issue with driving scale.
Jeffrey, I agree 100%. And some types of experiential learning, now we run programs that are the equivalent of a term length course, 100, 120 learning hours. We've got students who will do that and then go back and get recognition of external credit. Because you can, and I think that's the type of pressure. I agree, we've been having this conversation for 25, maybe 50 years. It's been a while. But I think, go back to the beginning of our conversations, the pressure on higher ed has never been higher. And I think there is a strong appetite for transition. And so, yes, I think we need to be getting as many experiences in front of students directly as possible. And we run an experiential educator fellowship, and it's always oversubscribed. We have way more educators who want to do this, who've never done EL before, but are like, somebody just give me a map, show me how it works. They want to join as teaching team for our large online program so that they can look at it and go, oh, that's what you mean. Okay. And so it's a yes, and we need to flood the zone with the opportunities, to quote Kemi on that, for students. And we need to make sure that faculty are able to see the court and understanding things. I loved your example of just getting your students doing the micro internships, going to talk to faculty. That's going to start to change faculty's understanding of what's possible and the value of it. And that's just going to pick up scale and momentum the more and more we have these types of examples.
So I want to keep going on this idea of scale, right? We've talked about students and faculty and the need for these different types of experiential learning, the need for early and frequent and building over time, right? Say I'm a provost, say I'm an academic leader, and I'm sitting here like, okay, why should I invest in this strategically? What's the advantage instead of having it as an add-on, right? What changes could we make? What should I be thinking about? I think the biggest question with scale is traditionally experiential learning has been heavily in the sciences, in engineering, in STEM. And of course, me, the humanities one, I'm like, I had to go out and find experiences like they weren't built, 15 so years ago into my classroom. So from a provost perspective, I want to be aligned with a program that can provide breadth, right? Not just to science majors, but also to humanities. So what would you maybe say to, a provost institutional leader when thinking about breadth, not necessarily in terms of numbers, but breadth of majors, breadth of types of knowledges and backgrounds?
The first thing is start with interdisciplinary programs, because that's how you're going to get breadth to begin with. Start with programs that provide the opportunity for students. Also, that happens to develop all of those foundational skills we were talking about, learning to talk across disciplines. We run global programs with students from coming across more than 30 countries to work together. The cultural divides between engineering and business students dwarf the cultural divides across human geography any day of the week, because we don't provide those opportunities. So start interdisciplinary. 2, make sure you provide demonstrator and training opportunities for your faculty, because they need to see the opportunity, especially if you're doing it at scale, and look at it and go, I can adapt that. I can integrate it, because you're going to be, if you truly want to build out experiential learning as a strength. When we built the original How to Change the World program a dozen years ago at UCL, we built it as a standalone. And then we had to go back and redesign the first, second year leading into the experience, because we realized we could prepare them better. And so you have one showcase, and it leads to basically a sort of a viral spread of the idea across faculty as soon as they start having it. And I guess the third element is start early. Start in if you can, build your first example as a first year engagement. Call it a first year global citizenship opportunity. Call it and start at scale. Don't be afraid to start at scale. And I will say, I know, Nicole, that when we think about modern experiential learning, we often think about engineering and sciences, but the best examples of experiential learning historically came from service-based learning. Up until like the 80s, 90s, service-based learning was at the core of it. That all came from humanities. That all came from other spaces. And engineering and sciences, yes, they have labs, and they've started to move into the direction of then getting real world experience. But I think there's a DNA there that faculty, and when you talk to provosts, they're going to look at it and go, that resonates. Service-based learning at scale we can do now because there's technology, because there's opportunities to bring students together in different ways. And there's examples out there to look at where that's happened.
I mean, we've made an enormous amount of investment and energy and created some very unique partnerships, collaborating with liberal arts institutions and faculty members from the arts and humanities to explore how they can embed project-based experiential learning into their curriculum. To Jason's point, service learning is a huge hit. Students taking what they're learning and applying it in a real world project, working with a nonprofit organization or a charity, tends to be very popular in those areas. In fact, I should say it's very popular in all disciplines for that matter. Couldn't double click on the interdisciplinary more. I think that's probably one of the most unique and exciting, exploding opportunities that we're going to start seeing in higher education, where there are going to be more project-based courses, experiential learning courses. They don't necessarily, to Jason's point, they don't necessarily have to be with an employer, but are offering 3 credits that may be co-taught alongside another intermediary partner who can remove a lot of the barriers, a lot of the friction to make sure that they're successful, that are open enrollment. Any student from any program can attend, can participate, and then the interdisciplinary will really encourage groups of individuals from different backgrounds, different disciplines, working together, solving the problem, coming at it with a different lens, which of course, as I mentioned earlier, and Jason mentioned, is what the real world of work really looks like. So is incredibly important. I won't jump the gun on Jeff's model because I'm sure he'll speak to that, but co-curricular is also another model that we're seeing. So our partnership, Jason mentioned University of Virginia, Kemi Jonah. When we first started working with University of Virginia, the goal was to get it embedded into the curriculum. And of course, like any institution, that's typically a longer investment. Requires change management, requires some structure, requires some capacity building internally, et cetera, and of course some infrastructure. But Kemi wanted to move very quickly, and one of the avenues that they identified that they could move on very quickly was engaging student organizations. And so student organizations are all looking for ways to give back to the community, ways to engage, ways to keep their membership engaged, to report on the impact that they're having out there. And so we created these career academies with University of Virginia, where the main way that students are actually finding out about it is through their student clubs. These will happen over the summer. They'll happen through over a spring J term, and they're completely optional. They're completely interdisciplinary, and it's really just participating alongside with your student organization, meeting folks who have shared similar interests and similar experiences with you. Sometimes they mix up the student organizations as well, and just creating a very strong culture where you can combine the hybrid model of working with organizations who might not necessarily be local. So it opens up the number of experiences that are available, experiences that they might not have in their own backyard, but have more of a place-based opportunity to engage with each other. So they're working on site together, they're working on campus together, and then they're actually doing presentations where all the students get to watch each other's presentations, whether the company is coming on site or attending virtually. And so this just, again, as Jason mentioned and as Jeff mentioned, we just need a huge wide variety of these. And if we only focus on a specific model, then we may limit the types of institutions or the types of students, even the types of employers who might be able to participate.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You're all bringing up so many really important points that, again, like provost would be thinking about, right? Like how should we scale? What is breadth? What does this look like? Do we just do curricular? Do we co-curricular? How do we get faculty? All these things, right? There's a lot of moving parts, which is why, as you say, Jason, we need like 10x, 10, 100, however many experiential learning opportunities we can get for our students. So I want to end taking an even bigger step out, thinking about the government. Maybe we'll do like a lightning round, try to keep it within, a couple minute answers. Say I'm a governmental leader, right? I'm maybe thinking about creating a bill for experiential learning or more funding. How would you advise me? Like thinking about the future of the workforce, of industry, maybe within just like my state economy. How can we make all of these things connect better? Because everything feels so siloed at times, like especially in coming from higher ed, there is this like lack of conversation, which is why we need so much more experiential learning in these kind of partnerships. So what are you doing at the government level? What are you thinking about? What would you advise?
First of all, we're doing programs with several states, including Indiana and Kansas, focused on just that. And one of the things that came up in the conversations with them is this need to create win-wins. Wins for the students, for the post-secondary institutions, and for employers. So focus on programs that solve those pains. So in the state of Indiana, for instance, it's how do we help students going to Indiana colleges and universities recognize the breadth of opportunities that exist in Indiana. Opportunities, whether they're with well-known large companies like Lilly or Salesforce, or smaller, less well-known organizations or manufacturing companies that students may not be considering. So I think that's one thing. Second, focus on the employer point of pain in an acute way. How can we help employers in the campus recruiting process to create those pathways from college to career? Because again, the challenges that Salesforce has in campus recruiting tied to the application avalanche, for instance, are going to be materially different than the challenges Cummins has in their campus recruiting, especially for certain types of roles. So focus on that. The last thing I would say is, and again, I know Dana feels strongly about this. Um, I think, again, stop overthinking it. Stop focusing on just apprenticeships or these big, high stakes, heavy lift efforts. We have an apprenticeship program in the city of Chicago, which gets all of this amazing support and press, and it's done some wonderful things. But at the end of the day, it's impacted 0.5% of just City College's students. It's tiny. And that ignores students who are going anywhere else. And by the way, the jobs that it's training students for are things that, again, likely are going to be the ones that are going away because of AI, like IT support or insurance underwriting or coding. And I think part of where my suggestion to the government would be is think about how to prime the pump, how to drive employer acceptance of models in low stakes, low risk ways, in ways that also support or address the pains that they have. The answer is not we need to force X thousand or X million new apprenticeships in the US and trying to do that for ages. Let's create more of these, back to my metaphors, gates, rather than having the government funding engagements. Because we know employers spend $10,000, $20,000 on every summer intern. We know they're willing to write those checks. How can we change the behaviors to drive them to want to engage more learners and increase the aperture of the types of learners they're engaging? If we can show the value through these dates, we know they're willing to fund the engagements because, again, there's a strong ROI.
Extremely well said. I think there's a few different ways that the government can set policy or create incentives. And I completely agree with Jeff's point. This is really around, how do you create a catalyst, an investment that will catalyze whether it's higher education institutions or whether it's employers in engaging more in these types of experiences, building that behavior, building the capacity, building the infrastructure, building the evidence, that encourages more to get involved and then makes the programming more self-sustaining long term. And so I think few just that we've been involved in is one is more the stick, which is can create policy where budgets for higher education institutions are based on performance. So are you actually delivering better outcomes? Are you delivering more experiential learning, work integrated learning? We've seen this in the province of Ontario here in Canada. We've seen this in the province of Alberta, and highly debated. But ultimately, years down the road, we do see that is having an impact because those who are getting more funding are investing that in these types of programs, which is encouraging that behavior across the ecosystem. The other one that we've been involved in a lot is when government will actually create funding. One of the challenges that most higher education institutions face when investing in these programs at scale across their institution is often this sort of cold start problem. Each one of our organizations does a really good job of solving that cold start problem because we're coming to the institution with templates, infrastructure, a network of employers, or previous types of experiences to draw upon that can help overcome that cold start problem. But often there's a first dollar in problem. Institutions need to see evidence before they're willing to create the budgets to invest in this long term. And every institution is unique, and so evidence from other institutions holds weight. But if you can actually get a program started in institutions, sometimes relying on funding, especially for those institutions who face the biggest barriers, who often serve the learners who face the biggest barriers because of their funding and resources. We've seen capacity building programs where government creates funding to remove that first dollar in problem, to get some infrastructure set in, to bring in a partner, to build some internal capacity to get started, to get the wheels really moving. And then once the flywheel starts to take off, start to achieve more economies of scale, the cost to continue increasing it for an additional learner goes down. And then, of course, that can become self-sustaining long-term post funding. And then the last one that I think is really exciting is that we see employer incentive programs working extremely well. So we know that the larger organizations are willing to spend $10,000 to $20,000 on an intern, but a lot of the smaller businesses and micro businesses often see this as too much of a risk. Again, going back to the signaling, going back to the relevancy, going back to the trust problem. They're seeing this as too high of a risk. They're not sure if they can actually take on an intern full time and also invest in the full time hire. They can't afford to bring on a bad hire. So having an employer incentive program where a portion of the wages would be actually covered, or in the case of the models that our organization will be participating in, a portion of a stipend for a short-term project-based experience that would be covered, whether that's funded by government, funded by philanthropy, or funded by even the institution. We've seen all those models work across the ecosystem. That can incentivize more organizations to participate. We can start to tap into the smaller businesses, the micro businesses who wouldn't have otherwise participate. But once they get involved, once they see the talent that are coming through these programs, you can convert those into your more traditional internship partners, or into partners who are willing to invest long term into these micro internships.
60 seconds. We're working across 5 continents, dozens of countries that are all asking these same questions. It goes back to the beginning of our conversation. Higher ed budgets are getting slashed by governments in a lot of places because they're not seeing the value. What that means is money is starting to move because they're recognizing the transition. I agree, win-win-win, to Jeffrey's point. I agree with Dana, catalyst, yes. I think what governments are looking for is also, how is this going to transform the model of higher education? And yes, about the connection to workforce, and a lot of the money is going into workforce, but the money that they are pulling out of higher education is not nearly the same volume of money that they're putting just into workforce. They are looking for new opportunities to transform the model of learning that is going on, the model of formal education. And it's not just higher education anymore. I'll just use the example in the US, Western Governors University. How many? They had 250,000 students. The median age is 37. That's not what you think of when you say college student anymore. So the mental model, governments aren't there to pay for these programs in perpetuity. They are looking to drive the transformation. And this is precisely where, and the transformation in Africa is going to be a very different transformation than in Indiana, which is going to be a very different transformation than Alberta or Britain, et cetera. And how is each piece that they're putting in place helping build new bricks and helping bring higher education as a whole along with that transformation?
Absolutely. I think you really summarized kind of everything we've been talking about with all these different players and really where we're going in the future of education. And it's not just higher ed, right? There are different challenges in higher ed and government, and everyone needs to kind of come to better partnerships, come to better collaboration, and be at the forefront of moving this conversation and moving the future of education forward, because it's changing. AI is changing it, everything's changing it, right? Well, it was so wonderful to really be able to dig deep into these topics with all three of you. It was such a pleasure really having on the podcast, and you've left myself and our audience so much to think about, which is always fantastic and exciting, right? Always learning. So thank you so much.